morning, everyone. I am Tara Nattrass, the Managing Director of Innovation Strategy at ISTE and ASCD. So some of you may know that our organization merged about a year, a little more than a year. And ISTE has always been known for technology innovation and shifting what we're seeing in classrooms. And ASCD has always been the curriculum and instruction research-based org. And we have merged, and as a former chief academic officer, I've said, isn't that the way it should be for decades, right? You can't talk about technology without talking about curriculum and instruction, and vice versa. And I'm really excited to be here today with Richard Culatta, our CEO, to talk about digital citizenship in a world where AI is prevalent.
And I think actually, if I can just make a comment about this, I think it's a perfect example of a topic that makes sense for ISTE and ASCD to come together, right? And so if you think about these two worlds, and in this post-COVID world that we're in, having an organization that's really focused on tech and innovation being separate from the organization that's really focused on curriculum instruction just doesn't serve anybody well. And so that's really what we're doing. But this particular topic is one of those great examples of those overlaps, right? You have to understand technology and how technology can transform learning, and you have to understand deeply what learning is about in order to do digital citizenship right. And I think a lot of the work that we've been doing around digital citizenship in the past has really focused on kind of esoteric tech stuff, make a safe password, right? Know your, digital footprint. Like, that's fine, but it's a really thin, narrow slice of what we really need to be talking about when it comes to digital citizenship. So we'll talk more about that in a second. Just very quickly, if you're not familiar with ISTE, if you, hopefully many of you are, but I want to make sure we have something called the ISTE standards. The ISTE standards are a set of guidelines for helping teachers, students, and leaders think about using technology in really powerful ways. They're available for free. They're available in many languages. They're used all around the world. And so if you're interested, please feel free to check those out on our website. We have actually videos that give examples of what each of the ISTE standards looks like in practice. And so check that out. And then if you're not familiar with it, some of you, and we may even have some ISTE certified educators here, we have a program called ISTE Certification. ISTE Cert is an internationally recognized certification program that recognizes educators for really having a great understanding of using technology in ways that really support learning. And so it's a cool program. We have educators, ISTE certified educators in 93 countries, I think, around the world now, and that's growing every day. And so it's a really fun program. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we do. One final thing that I'll just share before we jump into the topic here is that we have an event coming up in June called ISTE Live in Denver. Thank you. That's awesome. Somebody's presenting at ISTE Live. That's great. And so it's a good event, and it's really focused on how do we use technology to really transform learning. And we bring about 20,000 of the top educators together from all parts of the world, and it's a great experience. So if you're interested in that, go check that out. It's called ISTE Live, and it's in Denver this year. So that's it. Oh, actually, one more thing. Sorry, I said I was going to be done, but let me share one more thing, and then I promise we'll dive in. But it's just helpful to be able to share some of these things that are going on. We created a new service. It's called ISTE Connect, and it's a way that you can keep in touch with innovative educators and education leaders at any point along the way. And I thought do we not have a QR code for that? That's it. Look at that. I just was not watching. So this is, if you're interested in this, go click on that. It's an app that you can download. It's free. You don't have to be a member of ISTE or ASCD to do it. It's sort of our gift to the world. But jump in there, and there's a lot of great conversations about how AI should be used effectively, how we should be thinking about using technology in powerful ways. So come join the conversation if you're able to do that. Okay, now for real. That's close parentheses on what we're doing with ASCD and ISTE.
All right, so as we dig into digital citizenship, right? AI is shifting how we live, how we work, how we learn. And it also means we have to pay closer attention to DigCit.
Yes.
What are some of the core competencies that we believe students and educators need when we're thinking digital citizenship?
Yeah, I think this is really the key. Is I think our definition of digital citizenship has gotten fairly narrow. It's really in a lot of places been synonymous with online safety. And online safety, if that's what we're doing and calling it digital citizenship, that's a really low bar. And don't misunderstand. I want kids to be safe online, like no question. But if we think that we're like, hey, like just be safe, you're good. It's a little bit like I think about my my daughter's learning to drive. I'm like, hey, like put on your seatbelt and then you're good. Like that's all you need to know. You need to know like where you're going and what to do if you get lost and what who we want to go somewhere with. Like there's all these other skills than just like be safe. And so I think that's really critical that we're thinking, what does it mean? Digital citizenship means how are we being contributors to a digital world? How are we making our communities better, our families better, our schools better in virtual spaces? And so it's far more than just like, are we safe online? So these right here, digital citizenship competencies really are the 5 competencies that we think of at ISTE and ASCD on what we need to make sure kids know how to do. And notice these are all do's. These are all things you can practice doing. There's no don'ts. A lot of times, and we'll talk about this, a lot of times in our digital citizenship work, it can quickly become a list of don'ts, all the things not to do. These are all skills that we can practice and should practice. And and turn this back to you for a second, having just recently served as the Chief Academic Officer for Arlington Public Schools, it'd be interesting if I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on these competencies and what are maybe some of the skills that we need to be talking more about that we aren't as we currently think about digital citizenship.
Yeah, I mean, as we look at these, right, and we think about the prevalence of AI, things like balance. We've always talked about balance being purposeful when you're online and offline and trying to determine what is my intention and what is going to help me get to my end goal. Now, as we think about balance in a world with AI, it's still all of those things.
Yep.
I think it's also about what are the things that AI is good at and what are the things that humans are good at.
Yeah.
And that goes for both students as well as educators. And I think one of the things that we're seeing a lot of, how many of you have had a conversation about cheating and AI in your organization, right? A lot. And the conversation is coming up more and more. The way in which we're talking about it is to try to shift the conversation from one of cheating and establishing an environment of mistrust to a continuum of what are the things that are helpful to your learning and what are the things that are harmful to your learning? And how do we help students see that, right? So when we look at something like balance, it is still about online and offline behaviors and how people make decisions about that. But it's also about how do we integrate and navigate, right, with AI.
So I love this point, and I actually want to push you on another thing to share a little bit about. So so the 2 questions that I get from schools, and we spend a lot of our time, Tara in particular, meeting with schools all around the country, helping prepare them to think about doing AI in the right ways. But one of the questions that I get is, how do we stop cheating, right, as you just talked about, which, by the way, is a little bit interesting because if you look at the data that's coming out, we're seeing that cheating is a significant problem in high schools in particular, but the amount of cheating hasn't changed at all from before or after the availability of AI. So if we want to do something about cheating, like I just think it's hilarious. Like, oh, wow, all of a sudden we care about cheating. Like, great, let's do something about it. But AI access or lack of access is not the thing that is gonna cause that. But that's the first question. The second question that I get, and this is one I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is should we be creating a policy on AI, our school's AI policy? And so thoughts on that in light of what you were just saying.
We are having a lot of conversations about a few things. One is, first, we all have to up our AI understanding, right? Whether I'm not a computer scientist, I have not been engaged in AI for decades, nor have a lot of other educators. And I think one of the things that we're really striving for is the quality professional learning to ensure that we have the knowledge base to then even talk about policy and guidelines, right? Because if I don't really understand it, and I'm only thinking AI is what I see on social media or what I'm reading about in the media, I don't really have a solid understanding of what it means for me, what it means for our students. And so the first piece really is professional learning. And then when we think about the policy and guideline conversation, a lot of it has to do with what do we already have in place, right? Yes, we may want to talk as a district about what are our AI principles, what are the things that we really want to pay attention to. So I'm working with the district now, and we're talking about student-centered learning and making sure anything we do with AI is aligned to our instructional goals. It aligns to the learning sciences. It aligns to UDL. And we're not just purchasing the cool new shiny tool that's out there, but we're really thinking about what are our instructional goals. And so if I have a learner profile, if I have an instructional framework, how do I build off of that? in a world where I'm also now thinking about AI.
Yeah.
So professional learning, looking at things like learner profiles and instructional frameworks, maybe thinking about AI principles, but then also thinking through, do we need to shift our acceptable use policy? Do we need to shift our cybersecurity policy? What about data governance? As opposed to having a standalone AI policy, right? And then the one other piece I'll say to that is the thinking about guidelines for students and teachers. Are we saying these are some of the things you really need to pay attention to? They're not policies, capital P policy, that I need to run through my school board, but they are, what are some of the key guidelines we need to think about as we're using these resources? If I take it back to the DigCit competencies and being alert, right? Part of being alert is, what am I entering into these systems? And do I know, is this an open system or a closed system? Is it a specialized LLM, or is it accessible to anyone, and my data is going to be used to train the model, right? And so helping students and teachers understand that, I think, is really important.
So this is a really good, what you said was, this is really important. I just want to like underscore this. So it is rarely a good idea to create policy around tech, right? You're using APIs all the time to transfer student data back and forth. Do you have an API policy in your districts? No, of course not, right? I hope you have some sort of data privacy or student data, protection policy. That makes sense. So you make the policy around the practice, not around the technology. And so, thinking back to digital citizenship in particular, you have all the policies that you need in most cases. You just need to make sure you're updating them for this world that we're in. And I'm I'm a little bit of a geek. So when I go to visit schools, one of the things that I always do is I ask to see their acceptable use policy, right? And the acceptable use policies that most schools have are terrible. Most of them are this sort of list of don'ts, right? Don't do this and don't do that and don't share your password and don't be a jerk and don't cheat and don't do and don't do, which, other than being incredibly annoying, the biggest problem is you can't practice not doing something. And so if we want kids to learn these skills, they have to be do's. Those policies have to be shifted to be a list of do's. And just a funny quick story is I used to work for the U.S. Department of Ed, and we require that all schools have an acceptable use policy if they take federal funding to pay for internet, which most schools do, right? So we created that. The intention was never to have it be like a legal document that you use to sue a third grader, right? Like, I don't know where that came in. Some lawyers got in the way. It was never the intention. And so if you're part of a district, you're saying, well, legally we have to, but that is not true. You don't have any legal obligation except to create a healthy contract, a guide for how young people should be using technology in appropriate ways. So take those policies and update them for this world that we're in, make them positive, make them relevant, but you don't have to make them be legalese, and you definitely don't have to have them be aligned to a specific technology, whether that's AI or something else.
And I think aligning that to our vision for what we want for instruction, right? As ISTE and ASCD has merged, one of the key things we're talking about is transforming learning, right? Both orgs have been talking about that as individuals, and now we have this opportunity to talk about it collectively. And so as we're having conversations about AI and guidelines and updating other policies and instructional frameworks and things, it's also about ensuring that we're using AI to help us get to our vision, as opposed to being more efficient in the practices that we shouldn't have been doing in the first place, right? Like, there's a lot of conversation about efficiency and helping support. Well, if that efficiency is around ineffective practice, we don't want to be able to do multiple choice tests just because it's the thing we've always done, right? And so when we're having these conversations and we're thinking about what does it mean to live in this world and how is it going to shift instruction and how do guidelines and competencies and things play into it, it really is about that ultimate vision for how we want to transform learning and how AI helps us get there or does not.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so if we have people here that are like, yes, we're sold, we want to do this, what can we offer to help think about teaching these digital citizenship competencies effectively in schools?
So we are part of, and Richard, you might want to talk more about this, the DigCit Coalition. And we have a broad range of organizations who are really focusing on digital citizenship and what it looks like. And one of the things that the coalition has been focusing on is creating digital citizenship lessons for K2, 3, 5, middle school, and high school, so that we can focus on those competencies we were just talking about. So how do you teach students, back to your do's instead of don'ts?
Yep.
What does it look like to be alert? And so they are very much hands-on. A lot of the lessons are offline as well as online, depending on what it is we're working on, going back to that purpose of online and offline, right? And what we're thinking about. And so these lessons will be available to folks. We're hoping within the next few weeks, all of the content's done. Now we're in the packaging it and getting it out to the world mode. So definitely by ISTE Live, if not before, but getting opportunities for teachers to be able to use this. Because the other thing that I think is really important in this conversation is that digital citizenship has been something that we've often said, oh, our librarians take care of that, right? We don't have to worry about it. It'll be the librarian and the technology teacher. And in the world in which we're in now,
Yep.
it has to be everyone. And so these lessons are across content areas and can be embedded into other lessons and things that are happening. So it's not this standalone thing. Because when we talk about AI, it's not a standalone thing. It's going to be infused, already is, right? Across industry, across the things our students and our educators are doing. It cannot be a thing we're waiting for librarians to take care of.
Yeah, and I would say that's one thing is like, let's the librarian take care of it. The other thing that I hear often that goes along with that is, well, let's start this when we get to, junior high or high school, right? It is too late, y'all. If you start talking about digital citizenship in junior high, it is too late. And so it's really important that we start talking, right? These lessons start in kindergarten. Right now, they're at a very different level. We know that that kids likely don't have their own devices, but there's still concepts we want them to learn and get comfortable with, so that when they do have their own devices, when they are on various online sites and tools, they already have those skills built in. Right? We spend a lot of time. It's interesting in schools. We spend a lot of time still talking about like anti-cyberbullying, and I'm like, if we just why don't we just figure out how to build these skills right in the first place, and we won't have to spend all this time telling people how to not be bullies, because they won't be bullies in the first place in the virtual space, right? So we got to start that conversation earlier, and we've got to start building those skills so that when as students get older, they already, it's second nature. They understand how to be fact checking, how to make sure they're using technology in ways that are helping problem solve and making their community better, drawing them closer to their friends, drawing closer to their families. Those are the skills that we really need to be learning.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we intentionally built the lessons out for K2 and then 3-5, because what a 5-year-old is talking about in this space is different than a 10-year-old, but we've got to prep them for those, right? I have a kindergartner at home, and so now this is the world we're living in, right? And prepping him, and he was watching me do image generation the other day, and he's like, Mom, how does that work? And I was like, oh, are we going here? Like, this is going to be the conversation, right? But we intentionally start in kindergarten so that we can address those issues.
So I know that we don't have this ready to download today, but if people want to sign up for it to be able to get alerted when it's done in hopefully a couple weeks, what's the best way to do that?
Go to ISTE.org and digital citizenship. It's one of our initiatives. It's also the /, right? Like ISTE.org/digital citizenship. And there's a little box on the right where you can sign up, and as soon as the lessons are released, we will send them your way.
And this is all free, by the way, just to be clear. We're not selling anything. We are a nonprofit organization. That it's our mission to help improve the quality of learning and using technology. So they're available for free. So ISTE.org/digital citizenship, all one word, right?
Yep.
ISTE.org/digital citizenship. Just hit sign up. You'll get an alert. Again, you can take the lessons and download them. And we'd love your feedback, right? We'd love you to look at them and say, hey, this would work really great in our school. This would be really great for our, for teachers. Give us that feedback, because we're always improving and always building on this stuff.
So as we finish up our time, what is the one thing you hope folks take away as we think about DigCit in an AI-infused world?
Wow. That is the one thing. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I would say is if we do digital citizenship right, it will feel very much like, I think we just need to raise our sights a bit. And I think we've just gotten somewhat complacent. Again, this is what I started with a little bit, thinking that digital citizenship is the same as online safety. And if we do that, we are not preparing young people for the world that they're walking into. They have to know how to recognize. We're moving into a world where it's becoming increasingly hard to recognize information that is true and false in virtual spaces. But more than that, they need to know how to just manage the deluge of information that they're getting on a daily basis. From an AI standpoint, they need to understand not just, again, we just go negative so quick. How do we know when AI, is giving us false information? Sure, that's true. We should know that. But how do we know when it would be irresponsible not to be using AI to help solve a problem that you have that's tough? Those are the sorts of questions that we need to be discussing with young people. And so we have to shift the conversation from about being like, again, just not sharing your data online. It's true, that's important, but there's a much bigger thing we have to do, and we have to start these conversations early and help young people really become awesome humans in a virtual space. That's what we need to do. Digital citizenship is, how do you be an awesome human in a virtual space? And if we can do that, man, the future is bright.
Thank you all so much for your time this morning. We look forward to continuing the conversation and the awesomeness.
Yeah.
Thank
We'll
you
see ya.
all so
Thanks.
much.
Take care.